Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed your Memorial Day holiday weekend. Welcome to part two of our series on student loan debt, sponsored by Wells Fargo. Well, you're in for a real treat today, so buckle up and get ready. My name is Linda Williams. I'm a community outreach and training manager with Consumer Action, and I am so excited about the conversation, the much needed conversation that we're going to have today on alternatives to student loans. Why? Because it's being reported by the Education Data Initiative that student loan debt in the United States total $1.757 trillion. And if you tune in to part one of our series on student loan debt, then you've learned the impact that this debt is having on the middle class and communities of color. So it's high time that we have this conversation on alternatives, and we have an impressive lineup of guest speakers for you to get this conversation started. Shannon Vasconcelos is here. Shannon is the financial aid consultant with Bright Horizons College Code. Kate Hoffman is here. Kate is the founder, the CEO of Earn to Learn, an innovative program out of Arizona that's expanding across the country. So please stay tuned for her presentation. Robyn Smith is here. Robyn is of counsel with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles and the NCLC, and she's going to lead a discussion on student loan forgiveness program. I told you you're in for a treat, so take that last sip of coffee and get ready to be amazed because we are bringing the fire today. Now, before I get too excited, I need to go over a few housekeeping items and update you on what's happening at Consumer Action. This is a 90-minute webinar. If you have any questions for our fantastic guest speakers, put those questions in the chat box. My co-worker, Nelson Santiago, he's going to facilitate a question and answer segment at the end of our presentations. Now, this is where we get to hear from you. So help us keep that conversation moving with your questions. The webinar is being recorded and it will live in perpetuity on our YouTube channel. You will receive a link to the recording handouts by tomorrow afternoon, if not sooner. AFC professionals, I promise you, you will receive the password to claim your 1.5 CEUs tomorrow as well. Now, at the end of today's presentation, you're going to receive a survey about today's session. Please complete the survey and return it to us as soon as possible. In addition, as a bonus for attending the day, you will receive a certificate of completion. Now, for those of you who are new to Consumer Action and wonder, what do? We are an educational and advocacy organization. Through education and advocacy, we fight for strong consumer rights and policies that promote fairness for all consumers, but especially for underrepresented consumers nationwide. Now, when you're on our web homepage, click on that little burgundy link you see there in the middle, and you will land on our COVID-19 educational project page. There you will find a ton of relevant, easy to use resources and tools for the communities that you serve. So when you're on our website, click on that link. Now, let me go over, review the roadmap with you so you'll know where we're headed today. We open each and every training, regardless to whether it's virtual or in person, with the game. How much do you know? Today, we have 3 true or false questions on alternatives to student loans. After the game, I will introduce you to our guest speakers. The question and answer segment led by Nelson Santiago will follow. I will come back and tell you how you can donate to Consumer Action. So this is how the game is played. There are 3 true or false questions. First, I will read the question, and you will use the chat box to answer the question. Then I will close the poll. We will take a look at the results, and I will tell you whether that statement is true or false. And the person with the most correct answers, drum roll please, he or she will receive the bragging rights. So how much do you know? So let's roll out that first true or false question. Question 1 is about employer tuition reimbursement programs. True or false? Employers can provide up to $5,250 in educational expenses as a tax-free fringe benefit to their employees. Is that true or false? Employers can provide up to $5,250 in educational expenses as a tax-free fringe benefit for their employees. Is that true or false? Well, if you said false, you would be wrong. That is true. Employers can provide up to $5,250 in educational expenses as a tax-free fringe benefit to their employees. This includes undergraduate and graduate level courses. Now, anything over $5,250 is considered taxable income. There are a few exceptions, so if you're getting this benefit from your employer, I would suggest that you check with your tax professional. So question two. Question two is about federal Pell Grant. True or false? The class of 2021 left $3.75 billion on the table in federal Pell Grant by not completing the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Is that true or false? If you said true, you would be correct. The National College Attainment Network reported in 2022 that the high school class of 2021 left an estimate of $3.75 billion in Pell Grant on the table. The states with the highest number were California, Texas, Florida, and New York. You will hear a little more about Pell Grants from during Shannon's presentation. So question number three. Question number three is about the cost of student loans. Students who take out federal student loans during the 2023 academic year would pay more for college as interest rates increase. Is that true or is that false? If you said false, you would be wrong. It is true. As of July the 1st, undergraduates who take out new federal direct student loans will see an interest rate rise to 5.50%, up from 4.99 in 2023 academic year. Well, thank you for playing the game. And now I have a surprise for you. This webinar is being presented with funding from Wells Fargo. And here to welcome you to the webinar is Lisa Price from Wells Fargo. Lisa, are you there?
Hi, I am. Thank you, Linda, and welcome to all of our attendees today. We're so excited that you're here to join us for a webinar around alternatives to student loans. I am a program manager. I am part of the Wells Fargo Foundation. I serve in a group called Financial Health Philanthropy, where we focus on the financial health of individuals. And specifically, we work to invest in foundational structures and transformative solutions to address systemic inequities, build financial security, and advance wealth and legacy creation. And we all know that student loans and adding a tremendous amount of debt to an individual hinders all of those goals in attaining financial health for yourself and your family. And the accumulation of significant student loan debt is something that our country is struggling with. And we know that it will take somebody years, if not decades, to be able to get rid of that student loan debt and to be able to achieve other goals around their financial health. So I'm excited for the lineup of speakers we have here today to share alternatives to student loans and how to pick the best path forward for students. So with that, I just want to welcome you, say thank you for being here, and I'll pass it back over to Linda.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, audience, let me introduce you to our guest speakers. Our first speaker is Shannon Vasconcelos. She is a financial aid consultant with Bright Horizon College Coach. She came to College Coach with close to 10 years of experience in college financial aid. She began her career at Boston University, where she counseled students and their parents on the financial aid process and reviewed undergraduate financial aid application. At Tufts University, she served as an assistant director of financial aid and developed expertise in the field of health professionals and health professionals financial aid. In that position, she was responsible for financial aid application review, granting awards and loan processing, and college financing and debt management counseling for pre and post doctoral dental students. Welcome, Shannon. Kate Hoffman. is our second speaker. She is the CEO and founder of Earn to Learn. Earn to Learn was founded in 2008 by Kate, a finance professional, under the name Live the Solution. As a mom of two children herself, Kate's dream was to empower individuals to become financially competent and build lifelong assets such as an education, home ownership, by developing the habit of saving through max savings account. When Kate learned about Access for Independence, a program of the U.S. Department of Health and Social Services, she had this idea that her state universities could apply for these funds and bring millions of dollars in assets to the table for struggling college students and their families in Arizona. The joint application of Earn to Learn and Arizona universities for those dollars was the first time in the history of the Access for Independence program that a state public university system applied directly to and was funded by the federal program. One of the goals of the Earn to Learn program is to minimize and eliminate student debt. Also here with us is Robyn Smith. Robyn currently works as a counsel with the National Consumer Law Center, where she concentrates on student loans and for-profit school issues. She also works on these issues as a senior attorney at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. Before this, Robyn worked at the California Attorney General's office, investigating and prosecuting businesses engaged in consumer fraud and unlawful business practices. Robyn also represented low-income consumers in a wide range of consumer law matters, such as the directing attorney of the Consumer Law Project at Public Counsel in Los Angeles and the managing attorney of the Windward branch of the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii on the island of Oahu. She received her JD from USC. Shannon, again, I want to welcome you to the webinar. It is an honor to have you here, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. You should have control of the deck, so want to take it away?
I would love to, Linda. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here to get to talk to everybody on the line a little bit about paying for college and how to help the populations that you work with pay less for college, hopefully not have to borrow so much in student loans. And Linda, I'm trying to move the deck and it does not seem to be working for me. Oh, did you do that or did I?
I did that. Go ahead. Just say next slide.
Okay. Okay, you go ahead to the next slide. And so Linda talked about my background a little bit. I previously worked in college financial aid offices. Now I work for Bright Horizons College Coach. And what I love about the work that I do now is I get to talk to families earlier on in the process, not, halfway through senior year of high school when perhaps they've already made some mistakes in terms of financial planning for college. So I get to talk to folks early on and share information about how to plan for paying for college. And where I always recommend that families start is determining their own bottom line. And most families skip this step. They jump right to, where do I want to go to college? After they find out where they've been accepted, they then try to figure out how to pay for it. But I always recommend families start with determining what their bottom line is. Next slide, Linda. And there's really, in terms of figuring out what a family can afford to pay for college, there's really 3 ways to do that. Can you move to the next slide, Linda? Oh, here we go. They can pay out of basically their past, present, or future income, which means paying out of their savings, that past income they've accumulated, their current cash flow, so what they're bringing in on a monthly basis from employment. And then, of course, they can kind of bank on their future income and borrow some loans to help pay for college. And I really like to recommend that families make sure they're thinking about all 3 of these sources of funding. There are some families who kind of just think about their savings, and if a college is going to cost $10,000 and they don't have $10,000 in the bank, they immediately exclude that school. Other families just jump right to loans and say, if the college is going to cost me $10,000, how do I borrow $10,000? And they don't think about what they might be able to budget out of their cash flow, out of their monthly paycheck. So obviously, depending on the population you're working with, if you're working with a low income population, realistically, there may not be a lot of savings or cash flow available. But think about the population that you're working with, and even small amounts of money do make a great difference. Next slide, please. So just to quickly touch on savings. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a little typo on the slide here, but I always like to make the point to families that it's never too late to save. Every dollar you save today is going to be a dollar that's earning interest for you, and it's a dollar you don't have to borrow. When you borrow, interest works against you. So save as much as you can, even if it's small amounts of money. Every little bit helps. And there are a number of states, and I put the URL at the bottom of the slide here, that help families in terms of saving for college with some matching grants or other kind of college savings incentive programs. So if you check out that article, it lists all the states that have some sort of incentive matching grant kind of program. Sometimes it's just straight seed money. The family themselves doesn't even have to contribute. So that could be a good resource for you and the families that you work with. Next slide, please. Also, I reference using cash flow. This is sort of tuition payment plans are available from almost every college out there. And I think they're kind of an unsung hero of the college financing process. A lot of families don't know that they exist, that they're a possibility. At most colleges, you receive 2 big bills a year, one for the fall semester, one for the spring semester. Obviously, that can be a huge challenge for families to come up with a bunch of money at once like that. But if you might be able to split that semester's tuition bill into 5 or 6 monthly payments, might that be more manageable? So definitely recommend to the folks that you work with, if they're going to be paying for college, look into these payment plans. They can definitely help folks reduce their borrowing. You don't have to pay the whole bill on a tuition payment plan. You can, borrow a little, hopefully receive some financial aid for some of it, and then, pay the balance on whatever you can on a monthly payment plan. So that's definitely something to look for. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there are the student loans. And I know this presentation is altogether about alternatives to student loans, but I think realistically, they are going to be part of most families' college payment plan. We want to minimize the debt. We want to borrow reasonably, but taking on a reasonable amount of debt to help pay for college, I think, can be a good investment. College degree, on average, pays off immensely. Over $1 million of earnings on average folks with college degrees receive, as opposed to folks without. So it can be a good investment, but you want to borrow wisely. And usually the place to start is with these federal direct student loans. These are loans from the federal government. They are every US citizen and permanent resident who meet some other very basic criteria can borrow these student loans. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, everyone has access to the direct student loan program. The needier you are, the more of the loan could be potentially subsidized. What that means is it doesn't accrue interest while the student is in school. But these are generally the best starting place for families if they need to borrow for college. Next slide, please. As you saw, those relatively small caps that perhaps could cover some, not in every state, in some states it could cover local community college. They're not going to cover the full cost of a 4-year school. So if families need to borrow beyond what the student is allowed in those direct loans, parents have to be involved. First of all, if we're talking about a dependent college student, parents could borrow what's called a Direct Plus loan, another federal government loan. They could seek out financing from a private bank like Wells Fargo, our sponsor, or sometimes state education loan authorities offer alternative financing that at sort of favorable interest rates, and then some folks will go to really non-education financing, like taking, if they own their own home, they could borrow a home equity loan. There are options beyond the direct loans that students can borrow, but they will all require a parent borrower to be involved, and they will all involve a credit check. So they are not guaranteed like the direct student loans are. Next slide, please. And in thinking about what kind of borrowing a student or a parent should take on, I think it's really important to run the numbers. It's a little too easy with student loans to kind of sign on the dotted line and borrow far, far beyond your means. They don't always have the same kind of underwriting requirements that other kinds of bank loans do. So it can be a little bit too easy to overborrow. So what I recommend families do is kind of take these sort of 3 steps. First of all, think about, for the student in particular, what kind of income are they going to make after graduation? This is very hard to tell. Students will often change their major or change their career plans. But if they do have a certain field in mind, go to what's called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. It's on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. If you just Google Occupational Outlook Handbook, it'll get you there. And you can see sort of average earning in all different kinds of career fields. So that can be a good resource for students to get a sense of what the future earnings might look like. They should also project their loan payments out. Okay, I'll sign on the bottom line to borrow this $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 loan. What does that actually mean to me in terms of my monthly payments after graduation? You can run a loan repayment calculator to help estimate what those payments will look like. And then you kind of put the puzzle pieces together. Okay, I know, at least I'm guesstimating how much my salary might be. And then I need to account for other kinds of living expenses, your rent and car payment or public transport and utilities, all those things. How much is left? Does that projected student loan payment fit in my future budget? And it's a lot of work, but I think it's really important work to make sure that you are not borrowing beyond your means. Next slide, please. So once a family kind of has identified their bottom line, how much they could afford out of their resources to pay for college, the next step is to find those colleges that you can afford, that meet, that come in, at your bottom line. And a good place to start, next slide, please, is to figure out if a college might meet your bottom line is looking at their sticker price. So here is just national averages of the total cost of attendance for these 4 different types of colleges you could attend: a 2-year community college, 4-year in-state public, out-of-state public, and then private university. So obviously a huge variety in costs. So after families determine their bottom line for maybe some of the populations that you work with, maybe they find that some of these different kinds of schools fit within their bottom line based just on their sticker price. If they can, between their savings and cash flow and their borrowing ability, they could finance $100,000 over 4 years. They could afford to pay full sticker price for that 4-year in-state public, just about. So some families might find that these sticker prices are within reach. But for many, many families, they're going to say, none of these are in reach for me. What do I do? But the very good news is that most students do not, in fact, pay full sticker price. If you can flip to the next slide, please. This shows our, at public colleges, 78% of students receive a scholarship or grant discount off of that sticker price. At private colleges, it's almost 90% of students are getting a discount. So while I think that sticker price can be a good starting point to look at, for most families, it tells you absolutely nothing about what you are going to pay for that college, because most families are receiving some type of discount. So what really matters to a family and what you want to convey to them is not necessarily to exclude schools because of their sticker price, but as a family, what they want to look at is what the college's net price to them is going to be. And the net price is defined as the sticker price minus whatever scholarship and grant discounts that they may qualify for. Go to the next slide, please. So I said scholarship or grant discount. There's a couple different ways to get discounts on the price of tuition in the college world. The first is through need-based financial aid. So we will quickly go over that. And to apply for need-based financial aid, you have to fill out, it doesn't happen automatically. You have to fill out at least one application, unfortunately, maybe more than one in some circumstances. And so these are the lists of the potential financial aid applications that might come into play in any given family's application process. The first one, the big one, the one that is required of all US citizens and permanent residents if they wish to apply for college financial aid, is the FAFSA. A lot of people have heard of that one. That is the main financial aid application. There are some schools, however, they're almost entirely private colleges that sort of got together at some point. They said, we don't think the FAFSA gives us all the information that we want. We're gonna develop this other form called the profile form that asks more questions, gets to more of a family's financial circumstances. So there are about 200 colleges that require this extra form, the profile. So that's just something to advise your families. I think there's a lot of focus on the FAFSA. A lot of families realize they need to fill out the FAFSA. If you're applying to one of these private colleges that requires the profile and you just fill out the FAFSA, you will receive no financial aid from any institutional aid from that college. So just make sure the families you're working with are checking the financial aid application requirements of each school that the student is applying to. Because it could be, it's going to be at least the FAFSA they have to fill out. It could be the profile. In addition to that, some colleges, this is pretty rare these days, but there are some colleges that instead of the profile, they have their own institutional aid application that asks some different questions, some additions to the FAFSA that a school wants to add. And then for students, I mentioned the FAFSA is for US citizens and permanent residents. There are some states that, and federal student aid, like the Pell Grant that Linda mentioned at the beginning of the program in the game, only available to US citizens and permanent residents. Some state governments, however, have made the decision that we want our undocumented students to qualify for our state grant programs. They might not qualify for federal student aid, but we want them to be able to receive our state grants. So some states, including California, have developed their own state, they're often called DREAM Acts, DREAM Act application, whereby undocumented students can apply for state financial aid. So again, a lot of potential applications in play. In most cases, it's just the FAFSA, but make sure families have these other potential applications on their radar, that they check with each school for what their financial aid application deadline and requirements are. Usually these forms become available October 1st every year. There is going to be a delay in the FAFSA for the 24-25 school year, but that's for high school seniors. This upcoming fall will be filling out that FAFSA. It's going to be delayed till we expect December this year, in case you get any questions about that. That's due to some major changes they're doing to the form. When you fill out the form, there's some sort of quirky timing where you are reporting a family, a student, or a family, if it's a dependent student, is reporting their income and their assets. Assets are reported as of the day you're filing. So that's what is the balance of your saving account as of today, the day you're filling out the FAFSA. Income is reported for what they call a base year, which is actually 2 years prior to the year you're applying for aid for. So for students started college this fall, the fall of 2023, they probably filled out the FAFSA either in late 2022 or early 2023 with their 2021 income information. So income is always kind of a little out of date on the financial aid applications. And that could be a good thing if you've received a nice, raise or promotion, since that base year. You now make more money, but they're looking at your lower salary on the FAFSA. But it could be bad news if your income has decreased since the base year, but the college is still looking at that kind of old income that is not relevant anymore. If you could flip to the next slide, Linda. The financial aid applications ask for very basic financial information, does not capture every student's circumstances. So if the families that you work with have any of these, are just examples, there's many more special circumstances, but if they have lost their job since that base year, so their income is now much lower, if they've got high medical expenses, they're sending money back home to an elderly relative overseas, if that base year income was inflated because they received a severance package, all sorts of reasons, all sorts of circumstances are not captured on the financial aid applications, and families should absolutely send an email in to the school's financial aid office explaining those special circumstances, asking the school to take them under consideration. Next slide, please. When the financial aid office receives all of your financial info, what they do with it is determine this number, which is currently called your expected family contribution. In the fall, it's sort of switching over. It's going to be called the student aid index, but it's sort of a measure of a family's financial strength and how much they can pay for college. They compare that number to the school's cost, and the difference is a family's need-based financial aid eligibility, and that's the most that the college can award them in financial aid. If you go to the next slide, please. So that's the very basics of the need-based financial aid process. The other big way to get a discount is through scholarships. If you can go to the next slide, Linda. And the biggest thing I would encourage you and the families that you work with to think about in regards to scholarships is changing your perspective a little bit. We as families, students, parents, we tend to think about scholarships as a reward. The college will award you a scholarship, as a congratulations on a job well done in high school. What I would really encourage you to do is think about scholarships from the college's perspective, where they are not so much a reward, they're a recruitment tool. Colleges are going to offer scholarships to the students who stand out the most in their applicant pool. If you go to the next slide, Linda. And so you want to make sure you as a student, or the students you're working with, are applying to schools where they are going to stand out. So this is just sort of a visual of a well-balanced college list that includes some reach schools that you're honestly kind of unlikely to get into. But on the flip side of that, some what we call probable schools, other people call them safety schools, schools that you are above average, where you stand out from the crowd, where you are almost certainly going to get in, and those schools are really going to want you. They will be the schools most likely to award you lots of scholarship funding. So make sure that the students you are working with are applying to a balanced list of schools that includes some of those probable schools where they are most likely to see scholarships. Next slide, please. How do you figure out if a school is a probable school or a reach school for you? A few different resources. A college's website may have some good information on their scholarships page about who qualifies for their scholarships. Every college website is required to have a net price calculator where a family can plug in their basic financial information. It will estimate, it is required to estimate need-based financial aid. The best calculators also ask for academic information and estimate merit scholarships. Real data-hungry families can dig into what's called a common data set that provides, you can Google common data set for any school. It shows you lots of facts and figures about what their student body looks like average SAT scores and average GPAs. That can help you determine where you might stand out. The College Board's Big Future website has sort of a bridged, user-friendly common data set data that's good to use. Also, high schools have college planning software. Naviance is the most popular one that can also give you a sense of where you might fall in a school's applicant pool. If a family you're working with is awarded a scholarship, I recommend that almost every family go back, try to negotiate to get that scholarship higher. Most families don't realize scholarship negotiation is a thing. At many, many colleges it is. The worst a school will do is say, no, sorry, we don't have any more money for you. But you and they might actually be surprised at how often schools say yes, and will throw an extra few $1,000s your way just because you asked for it and they're afraid that another school is luring you away with a better offer. So that's something to keep in your back pocket. Always try and negotiate, get those scholarship awards higher. Next slide, please. And the scholarships where we talk about the balanced college list, the recruitment tool, and the scholarship negotiation, that's all in regards to the merit scholarships awarded directly by the colleges themselves. And that is really by far the biggest, best source of scholarship funding. So focusing on the college list and where you apply, that's really how to maximize scholarships. There are, however, thousands of private scholarships out there from all sorts of organizations. We tend to recommend families start locally with their school counseling office, with community organizations like some of yours out there might be folks on the lines whose organizations offer scholarship funding. Starting kind of smaller with organizations you have a connection to already, that's going to narrow down the applicant pool, is going to be a great way of maximizing what we call these private scholarships from anyone outside of the school. There are, however, again, thousands of scholarships out there from national organizations. There are some good web searches out there. Scholarships.com is one where you can create a profile and it will return for you search results of scholarships that seem to match your profile. Again, focusing in on the student, their particular profile, what makes them unique, tends to be more effective than applying for a whole bunch of scholarships that are very generic, where you just have to be a good student. That's going to apply to thousands of students. And your chances of winning are sort of akin to winning the lottery. So focusing in on those with more specific criteria where the applicant pool is going to be narrowed down for you, it tends to be a great strategy. Next slide. And so that's about it for the sort of the main content of my part of the presentation. If you go to the next slide, I did throw in the slide deck this sort of action plan that you can recommend to families that sort of walks through all the different steps that we talked about. You yourselves on the line, as well as the families you can work with, I'd recommend if you're in a space where you're working with families of teens applying to college, following Bright Horizons College Coach on social media, I think is a good idea. If you flip to the next slide, Linda, these are all our different social channels. I'll call particular attention to the bottom. We have a weekly podcast and a blog where we generally run a couple posts a week all about the college planning process. So follow us. We share this slide in all of our presentations. There's so much misinformation about the college application and payment process out there that we are encouraging folks to share good information. If you learned anything in this webinar, post about it on your social media, tag us, and you'll be entered into a contest to win a nice fat gift card. So please help us to share the good information out there. And I think, is there another slide, or that might be it for me? Oh, and if you do want to reach out to us, if we could help your organization anymore, reach out to my colleague Molly. You should have this in your copies of the slide deck, and we'd be happy to chat about how we might be able to help your organization. And that is it for me.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Thank you for all that great information. Let me turn it over now to Kate. Kate, welcome to the webinar. It is indeed my honor to have you join us today. I fell in love with your program just from reading the information on your website. So please share with our audience, Earn to Learn.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Linda. And I really, really am so grateful to be here to have this opportunity to share a little bit about the Earn to Learn model and some of the history of how it came about, and also share the future potential opportunities with this program. So, and I'm going to be asking Linda to advance the slides as well. If you could go to the next slide, thank you. So just to reiterate, and I know Linda mentioned this in the introduction, my background was actually from the financial services sector. I'm one of those people that was struck by a lightning bolt and shifted into nonprofit, really wanting to identify where there were opportunities to make a difference. This was not about reinventing the wheel for me. It was really wanting to do something to support the community. And really early on in my research, I came across the concept of match savings, which absolutely resonated with me because of my background. But I also really love the fact that financial wellness training was such a core component of the matched savings model. Also at that time, really early on in my research, I learned about a federal program that was supporting matched savings work around the country. At the time, it had been predominantly utilized to support match savings relative to affordable housing, and it had been very limitedly utilized to support match savings related to post-secondary pursuits. I bought a plane ticket with my own money, and I flew out to Washington, D.C. to attend the conference of this federal program. And just to give you an idea of the timing of this, this was the summer of 2010. And I was the only non-grantee there, but I was really wanting to understand how it worked and what were some of the best practices. And so I came back to Arizona, and as fate would have it, I got invited to go on a tour of a high school here in Arizona that supports a very limited income target population. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that federal program can also provide match savings dollars to support the students in this school. So I circled back with the CEO of that school, and I told her I had this idea for Earn to Learn, and she said, I would love to see every student and family in this school enrolled in a program like you're describing. And so, you know, it took a few years to figure things out and socialize this with the 3 state universities in Arizona, but ultimately that is what happened. And all 3 universities in Arizona, that would be University of Arizona, Arizona State University, and Northern Arizona University, all agreed to take a chance on this model. Match savings wasn't super familiar to the financial aid offices, so we were definitely blazing a trail. All 3 universities were funded in that initial grant effort. And so we ultimately ended up with $21 million in seed funding to get this program up and off the ground. And it officially launched in January of 2013. And so over the last 10 years, you know, the learning curve has been steep, if not inverted, and kind of understanding the lay of the land as it relates to higher education and college affordability and college success, and then certainly recognizing all of the discussions that are happening around student loans. This slide really just emphasizes a lot of probably key points that this audience is already aware of. The cost has gone up significantly in the last decade related to the overall cost of attendance to pursue a post-secondary education. The average student loan debt in the country right now is hovering around $36,000, and that is a lot of debt for young people to be taking on, as we all are aware. One of the other things that I learned in my research over the past decade in talking to the Department of Education at the federal level was related to the Pell completion rates nationally, and certainly recognizing that the national Pell completion rate currently is less than 40%. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, that means potentially over 60% of the Pell eligible target population isn't making it to the finish line, and then God forbid they're taking on debt in the process, and then how are they not possibly worse off than they would have been had they not gone to school? So lots of learnings in the last decade that have really helped to inform the Earn to Learn model. And then certainly this was touched on in Shannon's presentation relative to the purchasing power of Pell. Well, with the increased overall cost of attendance, the purchasing power of Pell over time has also significantly diminished. So with that, could you go to the next slide, please, Linda? So just to speak a little bit to the Earn to Learn model and the journey that we embarked on over the last decade in Arizona, the way that the model works is that personal finance training is actually a prerequisite to even apply. Think of that as the student's initial investment in themselves. The annual savings goal to participate in the Earn to Learn program is $500, which is then matched 8 to 1. So the combination of the student's 500 plus the 4,000, the $4,500 can go towards unmet need. In the event that the student needs it to help offset the cost or the tuition cost, it certainly can go towards that, but it can also go towards books, fees, housing, meal plans, parking, transportation, childcare. And really what we found over the last decade is that a lot of the borrowing is happening related to those costs that are above and beyond tuition. So really thinking of how Earn to Learn can be a supplement or a complement to Pell Grant aid, and how it can help to address some of the gap that students are facing in terms of addressing the overall cost of attendance. I also like to think of Earn to Learn as a tool in a tool chest that's going to require multiple tools, and Shannon touched on a lot of them in her presentation. This is a tool that is really wanting to support college affordability, college success, and really trying to minimize, if not eliminate, the student's need to take on student loan debt, really trying to prevent student loan debt in the first place. As I mentioned, Pell Grant aid, this program is currently eligible in Arizona for students who qualify for Pell Grant aid. So as long as they qualify for at least $1 of Pell Grant aid, they're able to participate. They also in Arizona have to be eligible for in-state tuition in order to be a part of the program. The model includes success coaching. So there's a college readiness training component in the success coaching model. There's also a workforce readiness training component in the success coaching model. And there is an ongoing financial wellness training component in the success coaching model. And really, that success coaching model is intended to be a complement or a supplement to the existing student support services that are on the campuses, serving students on those campuses. So again, this is not intended to be a success coaching model in lieu of what our partner institutions of higher ed are providing, a complement to what they are providing. And to that end, I would like to also share, initially we started in partnership with the 3 state universities in Arizona, but since then, I'm really super excited to share that we have expanded to community colleges across the state. And what that does is it sets the stage for this program to be supporting the 4-year pathway, the 2-year pathway, and vocational training and CTE. We're also supporting students of all ages. So not only are we supporting the traditional students, the senior graduating and going directly on to a post-secondary pathway, but we're also supporting adult learners, that non-traditional student population. And one of the things I definitely learned over the last decade in Arizona was the fact that a lot of scholarships and grant aid are really earmarked to support that traditional student, but there is far less available to support that non-traditional student in the way of scholarships and grant aid, yet the cost of attendance is exactly the same. So I really am super excited that Earn to Learn can support that non-traditional student population. And I will share with you all that we even have examples of students in the program currently who are in their 60s. So we're just really proud of the fact that this is supporting that non-traditional student population. If you could please go to the next slide. This slide is really intended to give you an idea of some of the demographic data. The majority of the students that we are supporting are first-generation students. I would also highlight on this slide that the majority of students that we are serving are indicating an interest in pursuing STEM majors. We're really excited about that. That's just occurred organically in the program in Arizona. Since the program launched in Arizona, the majority of students have identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So approximately 84%. And that was true right when we launched. And it's true to this day when we have thousands of students that we have served in Arizona over the past 10 years. If you could please go to the next slide. So I think really what I would like to highlight is this form of support is a renewable scholarship opportunity. So students can do this their first year, their second year, their third year, predicated on which post-secondary pathway they're on would dictate how many times they can renew this scholarship opportunity. And each time they renew, it requires the student to save the $500, understanding that they will get the 8-to-1 match. To that end, since the program launched in Arizona, we've provided over 6,400 scholarship opportunities. That means over 6,400 times the Earn to Learn participants have successfully saved that $500 and earned that 8-to-1 match. You can see in the success metrics on this slide that it's a very impressive number, but the students have saved nearly $4 million in these matched savings accounts. That's money that ultimately allowed them to earn the 8-to-1 match, and that's money that they ultimately didn't have to borrow and they don't have to pay back. I would also like to highlight that our first year retention rate is approaching 90%. And for those of you who are looking at first year retention rates, overall completion rates, et cetera, I'm really, really excited to share with you that it appears, based on reporting from our partner institutions of higher ed, that we are on track to have a completion rate approaching 80% with this model. So I think that when you think back to the Pell completion rate that I mentioned earlier, the national Pell completion rate, it's really compelling to think about the potential that a matched savings program can have in terms of supporting students through to graduation. One other piece that I would like to share with you all is not only have our partner institutions of higher ed looked at this as a critical tool in the tool chest to support that incoming student population, be it the traditional students, non-traditional students, but there's also been a really keen interest in how this concept of match savings can be utilized as a retention tool. So think of students who are currently on campus and maybe struggling to stay there financially, really working closely with financial aid to do targeted outreach to those students who are potentially in a situation where they're having to take on even more student loan debt and might be on the cusp of dropping out and not wanting to take on more student loan debt. Really reaching out to those students and providing this as a retention tool to keep those students on track to graduation. And what I will share with you in Arizona, as we have reached out to those populations, working again very closely with the financial aid offices, the response rate has been incredibly overwhelming. The other piece that I would like to share that has happened in Arizona, and it's really ramped up in the past year or two, is thinking about the higher risk target populations within the Pell eligible target population. So we have received grant funding to do targeted outreach to foster youth experiencing homelessness. We've also received grant funding to do targeted outreach to the Native American population, to really reach into rural Arizona to populations who historically may not have gotten the same levels of support as students who are residing in more of the urban centers of Arizona. And there are far more examples of higher risk target populations, but also thinking about how a program like Earn to Learn with the match savings and the success coaching model can be a real tool in the tool chest to support some of those higher risk target populations. The one thing that I will share with you as I round home plate on presenting this morning is since the program launched in 2013, we have now been approached by over 25 states expressing an interest in replicating the model. And there's also been a significant level of interest at the federal level in what a program like this could look like as a future federal program. So remember when Linda introduced me, she talked about a federal program that provided the seed money to get this up and off the ground in Arizona. Well, that federal program, Assets for Independence, was zeroed out in April of 2017. So at that point in Arizona, we shifted to a public-private funding model where philanthropy and the private sector stepped in and took the place of that federal funding, which allowed us to continue the program and keep moving the successful model forward in Arizona. However, in 2019, we had the opportunity to work with legislative counsel in the US Senate to draft the Earn to Learn Act, which is effectively $1 billion expansion of this matched savings concept, specifically focused on post-secondary education. The goal of the Earn to Learn Act is that there will be a future federal program housed out of the Department of Education that will allow multiple states, if not all 50 states, to have the opportunity to replicate this model. And we're really, really excited about that. So it is bipartisan, bicameral legislation moving forward in the House and the Senate. And again, it's $1 billion expansion of this concept. The other opportunity that's happening at the federal level is we also worked with the House and the Senate to move forward a $10 million appropriations request for the FY24 budget. So we're excited about that because those dollars are also intended to help support the expansion of Earn to Learn nationally. And then certainly there is an opportunity with philanthropy and the private sector to also secure funding to help support the replication of Earn to Learn in other states. So we are actively in communication with philanthropy regarding potential funding to help support that. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, we're also actively talking to multiple states about replicating the model. So I would encourage those who are on the webinar, if you have an interest in learning more about Earn to Learn or wanting to connect with us directly, I would be super excited to have conversations about that. And recognizing that the goal would be to get the project up and off the ground and get it started, and obviously figure out who that target population is that would be the priority for that partner. But it sets the stage for getting the model up and running while we're supporting the Earn to Learn Act moving forward at the federal level. And then with the success of the Earn to Learn Act at the federal level, it really sets the stage for those states to be able to fully take advantage of that future federal program. So we're really, really excited about this model. And I will just say, as a final kind of parting comment, when we launched this in 2013, the #1 objection that we got when we went out into the schools and we're talking about this match savings concept was that it was too good to be true and it was a scam. Well, I'm really grateful to say we quickly overcame that objection. And what happened after that was not only were we overwhelmed with students applying to be a part of Earn to Learn, but then their siblings were applying. And we even had examples when we expanded to the community colleges of parents applying. And so really, this match savings concept is about addressing college affordability, supporting student success, preventing student loan debt in the first place, really helping to break the cycle of multi-generational poverty. And my big, hairy, audacious goal with a model like Earn to Learn is that it becomes a future model of financing higher education that is available to every family that income qualifies in this country because of all of the benefits that it provides the participants. So thank you for letting me have this opportunity to share something I'm really, really passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Robyn, finally, since the Biden-Harris administration announced the loan forgiveness program, I have been trying to get you on a webinar to discuss this topic. I am honored, I am happy, I am ecstatic. I'm eager to hear your presentation, and I don't know about the audience, but I will be taking notes. So
Great.
take it away,
So
Robyn.
So we're going to change tack a little here. I am going to talk about what to do with student loans after you have left college and have a large student loan debt, in particular, options for people to cancel student loans. I'm going to cover a lot today. It's not meant to give you all the information you need. It's more to sort of flag potential cancellation options for people to take a look at if it's something you might be eligible for and explore further. So this is just sort of an overview, and we have a lot to cover. Go ahead and do the next slide. So I'm going to talk about the types of cancellation programs available for federal student loans, and these are the primary types listed on the left. School-based discharges, these are primarily for people who've gone to for-profit colleges and have been subjected to deceptive and fraudulent business practices. We see these sometimes at nonprofit schools, but very, very rarely. The second type of cancellation is for people who have a total and permanent disability that prevents them from working. The third type is income-driven repayment. So these are programs available to people who have been on and making payments through income-driven repayment plans for long enough that they can then get their loan balance canceled. The fourth type is public service loan forgiveness. That's for folks who work in a government agency or a nonprofit for long enough and make qualifying payments while they do so. The fifth is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which I want to make sure people are aware of is something they may be eligible for. And the final, which was just mentioned by Linda, is the Biden-Harris loan forgiveness program, which I will finish with. Go to the next slide. So briefly, why is debt cancellation important? It's important, obviously, because we have heard about the large amount of debts that are outstanding and that people are trying to repay in this country. It's particularly important for racial justice reasons. We know that Black and Latinx students are more likely to take out student loans than white students. Blacks carry the largest average student debt of all racial demographics. And one study found that 20 years after starting school, the median debt of white borrowers had been reduced by 94%, while the median debt of Black borrowers had only been reduced by 5%. So the fact that so many people of color have to take out debt, they have to take out more debt, and then after they get out of school, they have a more difficult time repaying the debt means that these debt cancellation programs are extremely important for racial justice in this country. Go to the next slide. So I'm going to start with the school-based discharge programs. So most school-based discharge are great options for people who have been defrauded by a for-profit school. And when you think about fraud, it's sort of people who've been lied to enroll at places like Corinthian colleges or ITT Tech. Those are two of the famous schools that imploded in the last 10 years. But there are other existing colleges. There are a lot of these schools, and I really caution people to be careful about going to these schools and look at their public school options before they really decide to go to one of these schools. If they are defrauded, there are a number of options for getting their loans discharged, and if they do so, they will get a full refund in most circumstances of all the payments they made on their loans, full loan cancellation. The lifetime loan eligibility limits are restored, so that means the loans they took out to go to that school are no longer counted towards their lifetime student loan and Pell Grant eligibility limits, so they can go back to school later. Their Pell Grants are restored, and their negative credit history is removed. These programs are largely only for people who took federal loans out on or after January 1st, 1986. And the one thing people should know is they are available for people with consolidation loans as well as for parents who have Parent Plus loans. So if their daughter or granddaughter, whoever they took out for, was defrauded, they can also apply for these types of loan discharges. So the most common that we see is a closed school discharge. That's where a school closed while a student was enrolled, or if the student withdrew within 180 days before the school closed, or they were on an approved leaves of absence. It's important that the school did not complete their program through a teach out, and the student is eligible even if they transfer credits or enroll in a teach out but never complete their programs. Go to the next slide. And I want to emphasize, these are existing programs. These are applicable. There's a lot of folks out there who are eligible right now for these types of discharges and they don't know it. So it's really important to spread the word about these. And if any of you see folks that might be eligible, let them know about it. So false certification discharges when a school falsely certifies a student's eligibility for federal loans. There's various kinds of false certification discharges. One is an authorized loan where the school took out the loan without your knowledge or permission and you didn't benefit from it. The second is identity theft, when someone else takes out a loan in your name. Go to the next slide. The third is when a student does not have a high school diploma or GED before they enrolled, and either the school did not have a student take what's called an ability to benefit test. So for students who do not have a high school diploma or GED, for most of the time since 1986, schools were required to have students take a multiple choice test to make sure that they can actually succeed in their classes, that they have the basic math, reading, comprehension skills to do so. If a school doesn't do that or does something fishy, like give them the answers to the test, that's called a false certification. And that's a basis for seeking a discharge. Other types of fraud that we see in this area is where the school has the student get a high school diploma that's actually invalid, or the school states without the student's knowledge on the FAFSA application that the student graduated from high school when they did not. This is the most common kinds of false certification we see, and this is an extremely bad type of fraud because it's aimed at the most vulnerable students who did not graduate from high school and often are not very knowledgeable about the higher education finance system. So it's easy to take advantage of folks. The fourth type of discharge is if the student has a criminal record and told the school about it, and then state law bars a student with that criminal record from being licensed in a profession for which they are training. So for example, in some states, to become a security guard, you are barred from becoming a security guard if you have a firearms felony. So that's an example of where that person, if they enrolled in a security guard program and then found out later they were barred from being licensed, could get a discharge. Next slide. One that people are probably hearing a lot about in the news is this is the borrower defense to repayment discharge. This is for whenever a school uses deception to get a student to enroll and stay enrolled. And common deceptions are, we promise you you'll get $60,000 a year when you graduate. You won't have a problem getting a job. 99% of our students get jobs when they graduate. Those kinds of practices and misrepresentations that students later find out are not true are very common at for-profit schools. Another basis, if the school breaks a contract with you, is another basis. We can go to the next. So like I said, common abuses are lying about your likelihood of employment, your expected salary, the transferability of credits to other schools, the cost of education and how long it will take to complete your degree, the program has accreditation necessary for licensure when in fact it doesn't, falsely promising career placement and internships, and the big one that's a big red flag is rushing you into enrolling right away by telling you that you have to enroll or you will lose your seat in class. That's a very common one that we see. So the next one I'm turning to is for folks who have a total and permanent disability discharge. This kind of discharge also provides 100% discharge of the loan balance, but you cannot get a refund or removal of negative loan history. It is also available to all federal loans, people with all federal loans. The standard is unable to work due to medically determinable physical or mental impairment, and the impairment must be expected to result in death or last at least 60 months in the past or future. Next slide. The process is pretty simple and getting simpler. So there's no certification from a doctor or other specified medical professional if the person's a veteran who has been determined by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to be unemployable to a service-connected condition. If it's someone who is receiving SSI or SSDI benefits and their next review is set at 3 years or more, which is the vast majority of folks that are receiving Social Security, disability benefits, or supplemental security income. And a third category is if you're getting Social Security retirement benefits, but you met the above requirements before you started receiving them. Otherwise, if you don't meet those criteria, you can still get a disability discharge if a physician, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, or psychologist certifies that you meet the disability standard. And I said this was a whirlwind tour, so here we are on to the next one, which is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which again, that's been in the news a lot lately. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about it. This is available for folks who work full-time, which is defined at least 30 hours a week, for a qualified employer, which is a nonprofit organization or government agency. They have to be repaying direct loans, not FEL loans, and they can include Parent Plus loans. Direct loans are the loans that are made directly by the government, and they're the only types of loans that are currently being made by the Department of Education. However, some folks still have the older types of loans, which are called the Family Federal Education Loan Program loans. Those were made by banks. The program's been phased out, but a lot of people still have these. They are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. However, right now there is a limited time period during which if they consolidate, they can become eligible and have past periods of repayment count towards that. So we're in a very important time period right now for this. They have to make 120 months or 10 years worth of qualifying payments under an income-driven repayment plan while they are employed full-time. And then after that 10 years, they get a cancellation of all of their remaining balance. As I mentioned, right now what's going on is it's called an IDR recount for direct loans, which means that the government, recognizing that a lot of people did not know about income-driven repayment plan eligibility, can now get credit for time periods when they were not in an income-driven repayment plan. So as long as they were on a repayment plan, and in certain circumstances, if they were in forbearances, they can get credit for those time periods towards their 120-month forgiveness period. We can go to the next slide. So income-driven repayment loan forgiveness is separate from PSLF. So this is for folks who aren't in a public service loan forgiveness track. They can still get their loans discharged if they stay on an income-driven repayment plan long enough. And these time periods may be changing in the future, but this is what they are for now. So there are three primary types of income-based repayment programs, depending on the types of loans you have. This is very confusing. I totally understand if you don't get it today, but I will at the end give people resources for how to look into this information and figure out what they're eligible for. The first is an income-based repayment plan. That's for the old FEL loans that I just discussed. If they get if they're on an IDR repayment plan for 25 years, their loans will be canceled. The repay plan, which is a better repayment calculation for folks, is only for direct loans. If they make repayments on undergrad loans for 20 years, they will be canceled. And for payments on grad or professional study loans, it's a 25-year repayment period. For income contingent repayment plans, these are the worst, or the sort of least favorable type of repayment plans. Unfortunately, people with Parent Plus loans are not eligible for any of these kinds of repayment plans, but if they consolidate, they can get the income contingent repayment plan, which is not, like I said, it's not the best formula, but it does mean that if you're on the ICR program for 25 years, then you can also get your consolidated Parent Plus loans canceled. And again, right now is a really important period because an IDR recount is going on that gives people credits as if they were making IDR plans if they were in repayment or in forbearances in some circumstances in prior years. So I have clients who've been paying for almost 20 years but didn't get any credit for it, who will now get credit for all those repayment periods and come very close or get their loans discharged. Next slide. So finally, the Biden-Harris loan forgiveness. So this is the program that President Biden announced last fall, under which individual borrowers who earn less than $125,000 or borrowers in households that earn less than $250,000 in either 2020 or 21 were eligible for. Only department-held loans are eligible, which means those, again, only direct loans are eligible, and only direct consolidation loans that were applied for before September 22nd, 2022 are eligible. The Biden program would provide $10,000 in cancellation for borrowers with no Pell Grants and $20,000 in cancellation for borrowers that did obtain Pell Grants. As many of you know, right now, that program was challenged by several states and some individual borrowers, and is now being decided by the U.S. Supreme Court on whether or not that program is constitutional and can proceed. We expect a decision in June or July of 2023. So keep an eye on the news because that will be sort of to figure out if this program is actually going forward or not. If it is going forward, a lot of people clearly will be eligible for this relief. And it's a very simple process to apply for it. Next slide. This is actually final. I know a lot of folks here, if none of those options are available to you for whatever reason, and you're in a position in which you really need to explore other options for canceling your student loans, the final option is by filing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 discharges, which is Chapter 7 is a type of bankruptcy where people can file for the discharge of all of their debts. This is available to people with student loans. A lot of people hear from debt collectors and others that you can never get your loans discharged through bankruptcy, but that's actually not true. Chapter 7 bankruptcies are available for federal student loans if a borrower meets what's called an undue hardship standard, and this essentially means that the borrower has the burden to show that if they're forced to repay their loans, they won't be able to survive. They can't make their minimum living expenses, such as housing or food or energy, whatever it is they need to survive. That's kind of what the standard is. It's been typically difficult in the past to get those kinds of bankruptcies, but the Department of Education is now applying fair standards and presumptions. So if you aren't eligible for any of the other types of discharges, but you're still experiencing hardship because of your student loans, it is definitely worth exploring whether you might be eligible for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Next slide. One thing I do want to warn people about is there are a lot of debt relief scams out there. These are fly-by-night companies that email you, that call you, that get on Facebook, and they say, we promise debt forgiveness under the Biden forgiveness program, or we'll get your debts forgiven, no problem. And people really need to be very skeptical about these advertisements, because when they're promising something that's too good to be true, it probably is not true. So watch out for emails, phone calls, and internet ads. If any business promises it will get your loans forgiven and charge an upfront fees, or wants you to sign a membership agreement where you pay $39.99 a month, this is likely a scam. Watch out. It is illegal to charge these upfront fees under federal law before services are provided. And what we see happen over and over is what these folks actually do is get you a loan consolidation if you're eligible, and that's all they do if they do anything. So just watch out for these. So here are some useful, I've provided a ton of information, and I know it's way too much for most folks. So here's where you can go to follow up on information about anything that I've mentioned. The Student Loan Borrower Assistance website is run by the National Consumer Law Center. It's something that we are currently revamping to be more helpful to borrowers, but it's a great source of information. We also have a really good blog post that updates folks on current developments in the federal student loan world. So take a look at or sign up for that. Federal Student Aid, studentaid.gov, that's the Department of Education's website, which has voluminous and tons of information on everything I just discussed. So take a look at that website if you have questions. And then the Student Borrower Protection Center is another nonprofit organization that has a fantastic website with a lot of materials and information about these different kinds of cancellation programs and current issues in the student loan world. Next website. Next reading from my slide. Okay, so if you're a low-income borrower and you need help and you don't know where to go, we do have some resources for you. If you're in Los Angeles, give Legal Aid Foundation a call, or Public Counsel is another nonprofit legal services organization in LA that provides free legal assistance. Give us a call. You can also apply online and we'll take a look at your case. And if you're eligible, we'll see if we can help you. If you're not in Los Angeles, fear not, there are people all over the country. There are legal aid organizations, probably in your neck of the woods, and you can find your local legal aid office on the website I provided by typing in your address, and it will refer you to your local legal aid organization. There's also a list of legal services organizations that help with student loans on the Student Loan Borrower Assistance website, so take a look there as well. Next. If you want to file a complaint, if you've been a victim of fraud, if you've had a loan servicer that's been difficult to deal with, any kinds of issues you have, these are where you can go to. If you're having problems with your federal student loan or your loan servicers, you can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education. And in California, you can file a complaint with the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. If you're in a different state, there are other states that have similar state agencies, so you can also file complaints with them. Other places to file complaints include the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and your Attorney General's office. So definitely think about, if you're having issues, it's worth reaching out to some of these agencies. And that's the end of my very quick presentation.
Thank you, Robyn. That was awesome. Didn't I tell you we are bringing the fire today? Did we meet your expectations? Nelson, I know we have a ton of questions, but let me give a special thanks to our fabulous guest speakers for those awesome presentations. And before you get to the audience question, I have one question. May I ask that question to jump things off?
Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, sure. Shannon, you discussed Pell Grants, and the question that I get a lot is, what are the rules for reporting parents' income when the parents are divorced, separated, unmarried, and the kids are kind of like going back and forth?
Oh God, Linda, that is such a great question, and it is also a fairly difficult one to answer at this current point in time. I think I just briefly mentioned during my component of the presentation that the FAFSA was going to be delayed this upcoming fall because of a bunch of changes that they're making to the form and the formula associated with it. One of the big changes that is being made is who they are defining as the custodial parent when the student's two biological or adoptive parents are not married to each other. If your parents are married to each other or living in the same house, it's very easy. You report both of your parents' information. If they're not, things get a little trickier with the FAFSA form, because when parents are not married or living together, they say just provide the financial information of your custodial parent. But as you just mentioned, Linda, that can be confusing because often there's some kind of joint custody. There's not one very clear custodial parent. Historically, the rule has been provide the information of the parent you live with the majority of the time. They are switching the language on that. So starting with the FAFSAs filed for the 24-25 school year, which again, you can start filling out in December if you're going to be a high school senior, the language has changed where you're supposed to report the financial information of the parent who provides the majority of your support. So that may be the parent you live with most, but it may be another parent. And I think we are still awaiting guidance from the Department of Education on exactly how they are going to define support in this context. I think we need a little bit more clarity there, but the short answer is you report the moving forward, you report the financial information of the parent who provides you more support.
Great, thank you. Nelson?
Great, thanks, Linda. This first question, the person asking says, many of the financial support is for undergraduates. Do you have any tips for those going into graduate programs, law school, whether they're planning to go or maybe if they're already enrolled, can they still look for help?
Absolutely, I can touch on this, and others can if they want to jump in. Robyn, with your legal experience, you'll know a little more about law school than me, but
and that's Shannon.
Graduate students are absolutely can be eligible for financial aid as well. You would fill out the FAFSA form as undergraduates do. The one thing that makes it a little different is for graduate students, you are not providing parental information at all. You are just filling out the FAFSA with your own financial information. And again, in some schools, just like I spoke about earlier, might require additional forms in addition to the FAFSA, but you will at least be filling out the FAFSA and providing your own financial information, and student aid eligibility will be based on your finances. It's different for different kinds of graduate programs, but in many graduate programs, there's not as much grant funding available. The Pell Grant, for example, that's a program for undergraduate students. So grad students tend to take out much more in student loans, and they are allowed to borrow more in the government student loan programs. I showed you that slide with like the $5,500 to $7,500 a year for undergraduates, and it's higher limits for graduate students, so they can borrow more. Whether more grant funding available is a big question mark, and that will depend on the individual school and program.
Thanks so much. I guess really related to this is, up to what age does parental income need to be used for financial aid, or is it just based on undergrad versus?
The age is 24. There are a number of qualifications, and if you fill out the FAFSA form, there'll be a list of questions to answer. Do you meet any of these qualifications? Are you over the age of 24? Are you a graduate student? Are you married, or do you have your own children? Are you under legal guardianship? Were you in foster care since the age of 13? Are you homeless or at risk for being homeless? All of those things, if you can say yes to those questions, they will not be looking for parental information from you. If you say no to all of those questions, if you don't meet any of those qualifications, they are generally going to be asking for parental information. If you don't meet any of those qualifications, but you truly cannot provide your parents' information, there is a way to appeal. They will let you complete the FAFSA, and then you have to appeal to the financial aid office at your university to explain your special circumstances and why it's impossible for you to access your parents' information.
Thanks so much. And just we have another question or two related to age. What about senior citizens who are deciding they're going to go back to school? Are you aware of any resources for them, or any special scholarships available? Who may be either looking for advanced degrees or even bachelor's degrees?
I am not aware off the top of my head of specific resources. They can apply for financial aid, like anyone else. Again, it would be they're not going to be looking for the senior citizens' parents' information. So they can fill out a FAFSA. Individual schools who are maybe looking to increase the diversity on their campus, and they don't get many senior citizens, that could make you kind of a unique student, where maybe they throw some scholarship funding your way. You can also check on a scholarship search site. I meant there's a number of them out there. Scholarships.com is one where you can fill out a profile where you list all where you come, what state you live in, your ethnic background, your age, your intended major, like all these questions, and it will return scholarships that are suited for you. There may be, if you fill out one of those profiles, they may find some senior citizen specific scholarships. Also, any organizations that serve seniors like AARP, for example, or other organizations like that. If you look on their website, you may be able to find some special scholarship resources.
Great, thank you. Kate, one question for you related to age as well. Is there any kind of age limit with Earn to Learn? Any cutoff at 30, for example?
So there is not an age limit with Earn to Learn. And in fact, the oldest student that I'm aware of that we have served in Arizona is 72 years old. So Earn to Learn can certainly be a tool in the tool chest to help address college affordability for older adults and senior citizens. And we're really excited about that, because really there's a lot of folks who might have tried going to school, but life happened and they weren't able to complete. And this is a way for them to come back in and have the opportunity to pursue a post-secondary pathway. So again, we're really excited about the opportunity to support non-traditional students with this match savings model of all ages, students of all ages.
Thank you, Kate. And then somebody chimed in with a comment, this is why it's a good idea to check what's available locally. State of Georgia, they say, has free college for consumers over 62. So something to check out what may be available at your college. And then Kate, somebody's asking, and maybe you can clarify. The question is, what is required for a university to become a partner of Earn to Learn? That's the question.
Okay, so what is happening right now is we're talking to a number of universities and community colleges across the country who are interested in replicating the model. Typically what transpires is we meet with the folks from the schools that are interested in what it could look like to partner on a concept like Earn to Learn. And ultimately, part of it is figuring out who the highest priority need is within the target population that they would like to support, or would they like to just support the Pell eligible target population in general. In addition to that, exploring the nature of the funding model and determining the overall size of the cohort they would like to enroll in a program like Earn to Learn is part of the conversation. We work predominantly with the financial aid offices, the admissions offices, enrollment. So it would definitely require meeting with the financial aid offices to talk to them more specifically about other potential scholarship programs that they might be offering, other types of institutional aid, and how this tool can fit into that overall tool chest that they're providing to students on their campuses. So I would just encourage whoever asked that question, if they would like to meet in following up to this webinar, I would be happy to do that.
Great, thank you. If somebody reaches out to us and wants your contact info for any of the speakers, is it okay to share that?
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I apologize for not including my contact information in the final slide. So absolutely.
Great, thank you. Robyn, we're being asked, what if you were, regarding the disability discharged, what if you were disabled when you got your degree, but are permanently and totally disabled?
Yeah, those folks can still apply for disability discharge. Just because you were disabled when you got your financial aid or your degree does not make you ineligible. You just have to meet the standard, the disability discharge standard from the Department of Education, and you will be eligible.
Okay, great. So that doesn't make a difference then.
No.
We have somebody asking for the public service loan forgiveness, the 10-year requirement of payments. Does the time during COVID count when the government paused required loan payments?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. So the government considers the entire period during the payment pause for direct loans to all be, they will count that all as qualifying income-driven repayment plan payments.
Okay, thanks. And then for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, does that mean that you're going to have to wait 10 years after that before you can buy a home?
No, there's no 10-year, there's no prohibition after you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy from getting credit in the future. So I don't know where that idea came from. What happens is it will affect your credit score. So it may be more difficult to get a loan after you declare bankruptcy. But often bankruptcies can help, improve your credit score in the future, because then you're getting a fresh start and you can start creating a better credit history going forward. And so there's no such thing as a 10-year ban. It's just when your credit history is good enough that a bank will make a loan to you.
And then somewhat related, somebody's asking, I guess, you'd want to be hesitant. They're asking about declaring Chapter 7 to better handle their expenses, as this could negatively impact their ability to borrow funds for school. What about that? How does it impact future borrowing for school?
So the federal government doesn't do any credit check on loans. So if you've declared bankruptcy and you still want to go to college, you can still borrow federal financial aid. Of course, if you already took out student loans or Pell Grants, that will count. Those that you've taken out, even if they've been discharged, will count towards your lifetime limit. They won't be taken off your financial aid history. And so you're still subject to those financial aid limits for undergrad. And then, of course, there's way higher limits for graduate loans. But if you declare bankruptcy, that's not a bar to borrowing financial aid. It may, of course, impact what you can borrow in private student loans, because they do look at your credit history in determining whether or not they'll loan to you, and if so, at what interest rates.
And just to piggyback off of that, while Robyn is absolutely right, it does not affect your ability to borrow the federal student loans. Bankruptcy does affect ability to borrow federal parent loans, that Parent Plus loan where they do run a credit check. So the student themselves can absolutely declare bankruptcy, but if a parent does, it can affect that Plus loan eligibility for, I believe it's 5 years into the future.
Great, thank you. And then I'll just do just a couple more questions, because I know we're over, but if there are remaining questions after, please submit them and we can try to get them to the speakers. Somebody's saying that they work with adult learners in tech training certification programs, where training lasts 12 to 16 weeks. Is Earn to Learn, or might Earn to Learn be a resource for those type of non-traditional learners?
Absolutely. In Arizona in 2019, we actually started having conversations around what this model could look like in terms of supporting vocational training and CTE. And we have successfully started supporting those students, including some of those shorter term credentials. So absolutely, this could be a tool in their tool chest. And in fact, just this week, we launched a pilot in Arizona where we're supporting a certificate program that currently isn't eligible for Title IV funding, currently isn't eligible for federal financial aid, because there's a real cost to some of those programs as well. And this can be a tool to help those students with the affordability piece. So definitely.
Thanks so much. And then someone's asking, if a student who is not from Arizona ends up at an Arizona school, would they be eligible as well?
So currently in Arizona, it is positioned to support students who are eligible for in-state tuition. Mm-hmm. However, to that end, really that target population is being defined by our partner institutions of higher ed. So it's really up to the partner institution of higher ed. But currently in Arizona, it's structured that way. I will say, with the level of interest coming from across the country, there's a very real probability that this program could be popping up in the state where that person resides. And so the future to be determined on how that might look with other states replicating the model, and where there could be opportunities for out-of-state students to come into Arizona and participate. So again, to be determined, but that's an excellent question.
Thanks very much, Kate. And then I guess the last question for now is, when financial aid, people are looking at parents' income, do they also look at the fact that some of these parents, owe more than $50,000 themselves in student loan debt? Is that considered?
It is not considered by default. It is not asked about on the FAFSA. They ask about your income, your assets. They don't really ask about your debts, but it is a fantastic special circumstance to bring up to the financial aid offices. You have to take the initiative to do so, because again, it's not asked for on the FAFSA form itself. You have to send an email into the financial aid office at the school you attend or any schools you're applying to around the same time you submit the FAFSA, and ask them to please take this circumstance under consideration. You'd want to document it. So, attach a student loan statement showing the debt that the parent has taken on, and then it is up to the school's discretion whether they choose to take that into consideration or not. So you may have better luck at some schools than others. So again, not on the form itself. You have to take the initiative to bring it up, but if you do, it is within the school's discretion to take it into consideration if they want to.
Thank you, Shannon. I'll turn it over to you, Linda. Thank you so much, speakers, for helping with all these questions.
Great, Nelson. Thank you. I would like to join Nelson in thanking our fabulous speakers for hanging in there and answering all of those questions. And audience, great questions to keep the conversation moving. Again, I would like to thank Wells Fargo, our funder, for helping us present this webinar, and a special thank to Lisa Price from the Wells Fargo Foundation for making a guest appearance. Thank you, Lisa. If you would like to contribute to consumer action, you can do so online, by credit card, or even PayPal by going to our website. The address is there on the screen, www.consumer-action.org/giving, or you can mail us a check to Consumer Action. Attention Membership Giving, 57 Post Street, Suite 111, San Francisco, California, 94104. Don't have a check to send? No worries. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. It is free, and it would help us continue to bring you these great webinars. Speaking of great webinars, Wells Fargo will be hosting another webinar for us on disparities in debt. Be on the lookout for an invite to that webinar. It should be going out later this week. It's going to be a blast. Sign up as soon as you receive the invite. Again, a very, very special thanks for our guest speaker. Join me in sending them the love for those excellent presentations. I can't wait to hear what you think about today's webinar. So please remember to complete the survey. We value your feedback as we strive to bring you timely, relevant information that will make a difference in the lives of the communities that you serve. That is all we have for you today. Thank you for joining us and submitting your questions. Again, a link to today's recording will be in your inbox soon, so watch your inbox. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service, and have a great rest of your day.